Hey, what's up, everybody? We are here with some MMA DFS DraftKings pick. UFC Vegas 37, Anthony Smith, Ryan Spann. FanDuel tips, lineup advice, fight breakdowns, bets, picks, you name it. We're here to give it to you in a quick rundown for this Saturday slate. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, joined by Jake the Snake, owner of MMADFS.com, writer of the UFC Daily Plug at OccupyFantasy.com. Jake, what's up, buddy? Missed you, man.
It's nice to get a couple of weeks off, but I miss being here.
Yeah, so we're glad to have you back. So Jake was on vacation for a little bit, then we had a slate off, and now we're back in the groove of things. So MMADFS.com, the normal write-ups are back. UFC Daily Plug at Occupy Fantasy is back. The Occupy model has always been back, and in this video particularly, we're going to give you a high-level overview of here's what's in store: the main slate, the newcomers making their UFC debut, one really mispriced fighter on DraftKings and what to do with that in your lineups. Talk about a couple of fights that we want to target for our tournament lineups, and Jake and I will each give one low-owned fighter that we really like as a tournament play. So Jake, let's talk about it. This main event first. Anthony Smith, Ryan Spann. I know you're a big fan of Anthony Smith, so talk to me about this fight, what it means for low risk and high risk contests, and what you expect to happen.
Yeah, so we've got two kind of lower volume guys in terms of their, career significant strikes landed. Neither guys really lands many takedowns either. So we're kind of looking at a low striking volume, low grappling, a fight that's going to be dependent on probably a finish in the first two rounds for either guy to really put up a big score. I don't really think we're going to get one of those fights where we get a super volume driven 5-round decision that, scores a ton. So we throw that out. I don't think Spann could even make it. I mean, honestly, if you looked at some of his fights, like if you look at his fight against Sam Alvey, dude was gassing hard in the third round. So, I mean, I don't think there's any way he's going 5 full rounds. And if we look at Anthony Smith, he scores okay at times, but when fights get past the second round, he's normally not putting up big scores. Like I've got some of his DraftKings scores in front of me. Anything that's made it past the second round, 83 points, 79, 72, 70, those are all third round knockouts and one third round submission. I mean, it's unlikely to score well if it gets past the second round, in my opinion. But at the same time, for low risk on DraftKings, I think you still want to stack it. There's a pretty good chance that this ends in the first 2 rounds. Ryan Spann, really good about ending fights early, has also been finished early himself. So there's still a good chance it does end early, does produce a 100-point score, but there are ways it fails. So from a low-risk perspective, I'm stacking it on DraftKings. From a high-risk perspective, I'm going to have less exposure than normal, but I'm still going to have some level of exposure, kind of focusing on the idea, what are the chances that these two guys get a finish in the first 2 rounds? How are you approaching it?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how I'm approaching it too. On DraftKings, the pricing discrepancy makes it really nice. Spann is super cheap, so that's always what we look for when stacking main event. And then the fact that this is a larger card, 14 fights, a lot of newcomers, a lot of trash fighters, like so many wide ranges of outcomes here that there are easily ways that the winning fighter here in the main event is outscored. So I really think an underweight approach in tournaments is the way to go. And, small field contests, you can still play either one of these guys. And like you said, low risk, definitely stack it. So speaking of some of those newcomers, we have 3 fighters making their debut on this card. We have Blanchfield. We have, and let me pull up the list here before I get it all wrong. So we have Blanchfield. We have Mandy Bohm and Brandon Jenkins. So 3 different fighters. So Jake, I'll throw a name. You give me maybe a brief overview of what this fighter's style is like, and then some context about this fighter heading into their debut, okay?
It sounds good.
All right, Aaron Blanchfield.
Yeah, so she's a young BJJ black belt. She started off as just really purely a grappler. She's kind of improved her striking some. Still super young, 22 years old, 6-1. She has 2 KOs and a submission win. She's had a few fights against UFC fighters already. She beat Kay Hansen and Victoria Leonardo. Her only career loss was a split decision against Tracy Cortez. And honestly, I thought that fight could have gone Blanchfield's way. So she could be 7-0 right now with 3 wins over current UFC fighters, if we're still calling Victoria Leonardo current, which I don't know her status, but she at least was a UFC fighter, and she's been in the UFC. So I think Blanchfield has a great matchup here against Sarah Alper. Alper got absolutely destroyed in her last fight, just mauled, really got knocked out twice in that fight due to a referee error where they paused it thinking there was an illegal knee. It wasn't an illegal knee. It should have been a TKO. They let it keep going. She got knocked out again, half a round later. Not sold on Sarah Alper being a UFC talent. She is coming down from 135 pounds to 125 pounds, which always adds a little bit of a higher variance element. But I still think Blanchfield's going to run away with this fight. Alper is a pure wrestler. I think Blanchfield can win the fight on the mat or on the feet. So yeah, I think, great matchup, but, young, unproven fighter coming in. That was one sentence, right?
Yeah, a bunch of punctuation and some connecting words there. No, you're good. One sentence. And Mandy Bohm, another female fighter making her debut. What's up with her?
Yeah, so she's not overly impressive, but she's 7-0, 2 KOs, 2 submissions. 2 of her last 3 wins have come early. She's technically never lost. In her pro debut, she did get submitted, but it got overturned to a no contest. So she's still technically 7-0, and she's won 7 in a row. So her deal is, I really like the matchup against Lipsky. So if you look at Bohm's last, all of her finishes, basically, they come either through ground and pound or rear naked chokes. And Lipsky has been absolutely dominated on the ground in her last 2 fights, just mauled with ground and pound. I think it sets up as a good matchup for Bohm. Overall, I'm not entirely sold on her. So it's a matchup-based play on Bohm.
For sure. And then we have the final fighter making his debut, Brandon Jenkins, on short notice. What's the deal with him, and what are his chances in this matchup?
Yeah, so he's filling in for Dakota Bush. This guy stepped in middle of the week. Bush landed in Vegas, tested positive for COVID on, I believe, Wednesday. It looked like the fight was going to be off. At that point, we had 15 fights. I was fine with being down to 14 personally. And then instead of having 28 fighters to work on, we get 31 because Brandon Jenkins gets added. But so his nickname is the Human Highlight Reel, which I'm not entirely sure he's earned yet. But pure striker, no real grappling. Likes to throw a lot of flying knees, like spinning elbows. He's a kick-heavy approach, so he's going to throw a ton of kicks. No grappling. I don't know. I think he's okay. I wasn't overly impressed by him. So I mean, really, he's kind of one of those guys where he needs to land like a fluky. It's almost like a Jourdain light. He's gonna get like a weird fluky flying knee to get a KO, or else it's gonna be just an average volume decision with no grappling.
Fair enough. So speaking of that fight, this is one of the biggest decision points on DraftKings this week, where his opponent, Zhou Rong, was scheduled to fight Dakota Bush. Pricing came out on DraftKings. Bush drops out. Jenkins steps in. As a result, we get this a couple times a year. We talked about it pretty recently, actually, where Zhou Rong is priced in the 7K range, but now he's minus 300 as a favorite. So massive, massive value according to the win probability. And for these types of scenarios, for low-risk contests, you absolutely have to play Zhou Rong just based on his odds to win and his money line. If you don't, you're paying the rake in low-risk contests over the long haul on DraftKings if you're not playing these types of fighters. However, in high-risk contests, especially if we're not thrilled by the prospect of the minus 300 favorite, there are a lot of ways you can go. So Jake, what are you thinking about doing with this fight in tournaments given the big mix pricing?
Yeah, so for tournaments, I really think it's fadeable. We saw Zhou Rong fight once before, and he didn't look very great. He came in on like a 10-fight winning streak, tons of finishes, didn't look great in his UFC debut, lost handedly in a 30-27 decision, almost got submitted. I feel like he showed flashes. He showed a few flashes of decent striking. He's still just 21 years old, and he has 21 pro fights to his name, which is crazy. He started fighting when he was 16 years old in China.
I was going to say one fight per year since he was 1 year old, but yours makes a little more sense.
Right. He started on the baby circuit. It's tricky, right? So like obviously the value is there, but he's going to be, he could be anywhere from like 40 to 60% owned. I think it'll be closer to 40 on a slate this large, but in the past we've seen some of these guys get like 60, 65% owned on smaller slates. So let's say he's 40, 45% owned, and he actually has a really high finishing percentage, which I think is artificially inflated, probably because he's getting the short notice opponent and maybe based on his record. But if you watch the tape, I don't know. I think that we should take all of his record before joining the UFC with a grain of salt. I'm not entirely sold on the China circuit. I think that, some of the talent over there, these guys are getting like just super trash cans, get really padded records. They come to the UFC and just fall on their faces. And some of the dudes are really good, but I'm not sold on Rong yet. And what I'm doing with tournaments is I think fading the fight is the move, but it's super risky because you basically need the winner to get a low scoring decision and score like 80 or less points just because they're priced so low. So another option is to play Jenkins. I don't love him. Kind of by process of default, I'm going with fading the tournament. But what do you think? Do you think that's too risky, relying on the outcome of this fight to be a super low scoring decision?
I think it's definitely risky in the sense that it's a short notice fight, newcomer, young guy making his second fight from a questionable circuit. Like there's a lot of volatility in this fight, and maybe in both these guys may want to come out and try to impress. So I don't know. I think it's definitely risky, but again, this is why we're playing tournaments because it's an incredibly risky outcome. So I think fading's fine. No one's really gonna do it. Uh, I think playing Jenkins more than his projected ownership is the best. And playing Rongju for sure under his projected ownership is by far the move because there's so many other underdogs that we like. And if you're playing small field contests, less than 200 players, it's fine to play Rongju because you really want to try to get as many winners in your lineup as possible, which is always true. But because on a slate like this, we have a couple other fighters that we like that project really well, that aren't really bad, that are still low owned, which is a perfect combination, right? Fighters like Blanchard, who we really like a lot, but the field doesn't. And it's not like we're playing some, plus 200 underdog hoping that they win. There are a lot of good fighters. So you don't have to get as crazy fading these types of fighters in small field contests. So speaking of tournaments, Jake, let's briefly, since we've talked about all these fighters for a good amount of time here, 1 to 2 fights that you like both sides of in tournaments that should produce a high score.
Yeah, so I think that the Jackson Bays matchup, I think everyone's going to be on Jackson. I think the Bays side is actually kind of going overlooked, though. But I think the winner there is going to score well. Bays has never been to a decision. 10 of his 12 fights have ended in the first 2 rounds. Jackson scores well every time he wins. So I think you want the winner of that fight most likely. And I think the Lipsky Bohm fight is going to be another one that's a little bit sneakier. Everyone's going to be on Jackson, but Lipsky Bohm are both projecting to be in the low 20s for ownership, and I think the winner of that fight is going to put up a big score. So that's a fight I'm looking to target heavily as a second option.
Very nice. Yeah, both those fights, one side of the Jackson fight should go under the radar. I mean, he's plus 450, so that's definitely fair. And then you have female fighters, which automatically get lower ownership because of the lower KO potential, and some unknown names in Mandy Bohm. So that makes a ton of sense to me. All right. Jake, give me one low owned. We'll go less than 25% on DraftKings tournament fighter that you're going to have a ton of tomorrow.
I really like Blanchfield here. I think that's a great matchup. We made her the cover girl for a reason. I really think that, we're looking to target, against fighters that are terrible. And I think Alper fits the bill there. And Blanchfield, she's so expensive. People don't really know. Most people don't really know her. I'm sure lots of people know her, but at 9,400 on DraftKings and $22 on FanDuel, she's going to go super low owned, and she has a huge ceiling here. I mean, she certainly has the potential to bust. That fight, it could end up on the cage for 15 minutes with the two of these pushing against the cage, but at 19% projected ownership, I mean, you have to love Blanchfield there. Huge finishing chances, and, you want to target these terrible fighters with the unknown low owned guys.
I wish I could give you another fighter because I agree with everything you said, Jake. And we had this with Casey O'Neill, right? King Casey, right? Where we get a fighter who comes in, they project incredibly well in the model. Your charting and your tape watching shows that they're in a great spot, and all of it lines up. Yet for whatever reason, they see low ownership. And those are the smash plays. I mean, I literally won 100K on that Casey O'Neill slate. Let's hope we can run it back here. I'm not saying she's Casey O'Neill, Jake, but the fact her matchup is so good that it puts her in the type of situation Casey O'Neill was in as far as projecting really well at low ownership.
Totally. I mean, she's definitely not Casey O'Neill. She doesn't throw the type of volume that Casey does. I mean, her finish is going to be more reliant on the actual finish and not the volume-driven point narrative that gets there. But if you want Blanchfield, I'm happy to go with Bays.
Deal. That's a deal. We'll go with Blanchfield and Bays. One just a little more grosser than the other. All right, we'll close out the show here with our stream parlay of the week. Jake, you had a couple weeks off. Rejuvenate yourself. Let's get back on the horse here for the stream parlay. Which side are you taking?
So you want me to go with a safe play, a risky play, or a crazy play? I've got 3 options.
What are you feeling? Yeah, I mean, you just picked Bays as your your low owned option, so I think all cards are on the table here.
How about you want to go first, and then I'll fill it in appropriately.
Yeah, all right, I can do that. I'm taking a look at here at your plays you have in our daily plug, and Jake, your ROI in the last month or two was like 70%, so I'm trusting these plays. For me, I think I'm going to go. Um, I like Tony Gravely in a KO. You got plus 340 in the plug, so that's one of my favorite bets.
That was one of the three bets I was going to
Oh,
use,
there
so
you
I
go.
like it.
Look at that. Okay.
I like it. All right, let's run that back with Blanchfield inside the distance at plus 185.
I could have easily taken that if you would have guessed. That's probably would have been the top option, but that was on my list as well. So Blanchfield and Gravely. Do you know what that pays off the top of your head?
Yeah, I just typed in. It should be 1154 plus
Let's
1154.
We will take that. Okay, that'll do it for this video. Appreciate everyone tuning in. If you want all of our top plays, specific lineup strategies on how to build on FanDuel and DraftKings, all of Jake's best bets, check out the daily plug at OccupyFantasy.com. You see it on screen here. If you want full fight breakdowns and betting opinions for every single fighter on the card, check out MMA DFS.com, the sheet where Jake literally talks about every single fighter in incredible detail. So go check it out. You can follow Jake on Twitter at DFS_MMA. You can follow me at Brian Jester FF. If you want projected ownership and all rankings, the Occupy model at OccupyFantasy.com. All right, for Jake, I'm Brian. Thanks for listening. Everybody, good luck this Saturday.